Remember 4.5 years ago when Barack Obama announced the end of the Iraq War?
It's harder to end a war than begin one. Indeed, everything that American troops have done in Iraq, all the fighting, and all the dying, the bleeding, and the building, and the training, and the partnering, all of it has led to this moment of success. Now, Iraq's not a perfect place. It has many challenges ahead. But we're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq. You know, 4 years ago, I told you we'd end the war in Iraq, and I did. 4 years ago, I said I would end the war in Iraq, and I did. For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. We did. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. I did. You know, 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq, and I did. I told you we'd end the war in Iraq. We did. I said we'd end the Iraq war. We did. I told you I'd end the war in Iraq, and we did. I ended the war in Iraq as I promised. In 2008, I promised we'd end the war in Iraq. We've ended it. I was able to keep my promise and end the war in Iraq. In 2008, I promised we would end the war in Iraq, and we've ended it. The war in Iraq is over. The war in Iraq is over from ending the war in Iraq. That's why I ended the war in Iraq. For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq.
President, do you have any second thoughts about pulling all ground troops out of Iraq, and does it give you pause as the U.S. Is doing the same thing in Afghanistan?
Yeah, you know what I just find interesting is the degree to which this issue keeps on coming up, as if this was my decision.
Now let's leave aside the fact that it's impossible to unilaterally end a war. The only way you can end a war is when one side is defeated or both sides agree to end the war. When Barack Obama announced that he was withdrawing from Iraq and called that the end of the war in Iraq, it wasn't true. It just defies logic. The war still continued. And by withdrawing from Iraq, Obama created a power vacuum. The United States military acted as an intermediary between the warring factions in Iraq. Remember, there are Shiite Muslims in Iraq. There are Sunni Muslims in Iraq. There are the Kurdish population in Iraq. Iraq is a contrived country that resulted from the First World War redrawing borders. So they're always at each other's throats, and the American military was there to act as a mediator between these groups. And when the president failed for the first time, it's really unprecedented, failed to secure a status of forces agreement, he created a power vacuum into which we now have ISIS. And the war in Iraq is not only not over, the war in Iraq is not only continuing with ISIS and other factions fighting each other. The United States is back in the war in Iraq. Here is an article in the WashingtonPost.com website from March. It says the U.S. military has a lot more people in Iraq than it has been saying. And as you scroll down this article, the very first line says the U.S. military has around 5,000 service members in Iraq, officials said Monday, far more than previously reported. Why isn't Barack Obama being made to answer for this? Why isn't he being asked questions? Why isn't he going to Congress to get them to support this? These are questions that really need to be asked by the media of the president directly. He never ended the war in Iraq, folks. For all of you who voted for him thinking that he was going to end the war in Iraq, tell that to the 5,000 service members and their families that are there now.